Howdy, everybody. This is your humble instructor for Shasta College Humanities 4 Film Studies. Hope everything's going well out there. I just started grading the papers. Essay number 1 yesterday. Have patience. Yes, I do read them all. Look at the comments. Um, we'll keep learning as we go along. I'm going to sign another essay tomorrow, but I it'll be based on one of 3 films. Your second essay, I rather write about John Ford's Stagecoach, Frank Capra's It Happened One Night, or Frank Wally's Frankenstein. Those are the 3 genres that were so important during the Depression era of the films industry. And that's what I'm trying to do in this course. We're going to go decade to decade. And those films represent probably the heart of the Depression era films. Yes, there's many, many more we could write about, but those are the 3 I've chosen, and I'll post that on there tomorrow because it's going to be due in a week from tomorrow. You'll have a week to watch one of those movies and write about the movie. It's okay to do some research. That's fine. Learn all about it. But I really, guys, want you to watch the movie and tell me what you're seeing, what you're thinking when you see it. Take notes. Remember, it's like you're going back in time into the movie theater with no knowledge of current times. And these films were cutting edge technology and it was state of the art what was coming out in Hollywood, and you're all in. Um, and the little textbook that I hope you guys get, it's going to help you with these essays a lot. But I'll go through some of it without boring you too badly. On page 40, look at page 40. In it, it breaks everything down. How to formally analyze a scene in a film and using the film grammar. You don't have to be a film student to understand what the grammar is, which is what does a director do? What does an actor do? What does a screenwriter do? You will kind of need to know that stuff, and it's fun to learn it. You may think you know, maybe you don't. And so when you're looking at a scene in a film, you could be asking yourself these questions when you're. So if you can't find something to write about, what is the scene about? Yes, you could pick out one scene from a movie and analyze it. That's fine. After watching the scene, do you understand what the characters' thoughts and emotions were? I know it sounds simple, but do you understand it? Or are you just taking it verbatim that you know everything there is to know about film and you don't need to look deeper? How did the scene make you feel? What tools and techniques did the filmmakers use in order to communicate these feelings? The tools, the director's tools, the cameraman's tools, the writer's tools, the lighting man's tools, the makeup artists, the scene designers, the costume designers, the musicians. A lot goes into a scene in a movie, not just setting up the camera and having 2 people talk in front of it. Are these elements in the film that I might not have picked up the first time I viewed it? I'm not asking you guys to watch these films twice. I already know the answer to that because I've seen some films like the film you're going to watch next week, Citizen Kane. I have seen that maybe 50, 60 times. I always discover something new. That's right, folks. Because like reading a good novel, you miss a lot in the first time around. You got to go deeper. You got to do a deeper viewing of it. Did I have expectations of the movie before I watched it? I would probably answer that for you. You probably yes, you do because you go well. First of all, it's old. Second of all, it's in black and white. It doesn't have any cool CGI effects, so you do go in expecting to be probably let down. I got that a lot with the kid. I don't know silent films. I was expecting to be let down, kind of dreading watching it, and then all of a sudden you may have been surprised how you got taken up in the story. That's what we're trying to do here. Surprise you guys and gals. Um, how can I learn from the movie's title? Think about that. What does stagecoach mean? Well, it's kind of obvious. What does Frankenstein mean? Well, it's based on a very popular book by Mary Shelley. Obvious. So we kind of know what those titles are. Maybe you don't. Maybe you think you know what Frankenstein is. Do you? Maybe you've seen the new versions of it. Maybe you read the Mary Shelley book. Well, when that movie came out, the Mary Shelley book had been a bestseller, so a lot of people knew it. It happened one night. Hmm, that's something you have has kind of a provocative image, right? It happened. Well, what happened one night? Well, it is a romantic comedy. So, what happens in romance, folks? Probably people falling in love. I'm just guessing. Okay. There is this thing called narrative, which is the story. It's a fancy word for story, the plot. Um, is narrative is not only the story being told, but also the cinematic and other devices that help tell the story. Analyzing narrative means examining the effect of a narrator, the relationships of characters, heroes pursuing goals, villains thwarting that process. It means taking a stock of individual scenes and how they fit into the overall plot and the sequences of which the plots are arranged and cause and effect of the relationship. When you're watching the kid and the police are after him, he runs out the window and he's running from them along the rooftops as the child is being taken off to the orphanage. It directly affects what's going on in the plot. The action affects the emotional narrative. You want him to escape. You feel sorry for the kid. It looks like the authorities are kind of evil. The state authorities come in to get the child. If you've seen the movie, I hope you did. So this will help you examine these elements closer. Did I see any narrative or visual patterns reoccurring? If so, what are those patterns? Why is the director repeating them? We could talk about all sorts of films that there's repeated scenes over and over and over again. I mean, Quentin Tarantino, a new movie, he repeats some scenes. He beats you to death with repetition. Not the same scene, folks, but similar, trying to get his point across because he wants to get his point across. And so he'll show a scene from different perspectives of the character. Repetition is part of the filmmaker's tools. You might need to show something in a different way more than once to get your point across. Who was the movie's protagonist? Who was the antagonist? Sometimes it's not so simple. Not that simple. Do you know what a protagonist is? Antagonist. Usually, the protagonist might be the hero of the journey, the person that the story happens to. The antagonist is the person that's kind of mucking up the works. Is usually the could be the bad guy or someone who's not necessarily bad, but not the hero of the journey or heroine of the journey. Is the camera the only motivation? let me try rephrase this into something a little simpler. Is the camera telling you how to feel, what to look at, what to see? Is it making all your choices for you? Or is it depicting something and it's letting you decide? Some filmmakers, like Alfred Hitchcock, will show you exactly what they want you to see only. Other filmmakers, like Ingmar Bergman or Stanley Kubrick, make you work for it a little bit. Sometimes you don't know what you're seeing literally because it's an emotional thing he's trying to get across, and he's not going to show you the literal visual equivalency of what you're feeling. There's some very complicated filmmakers out there who aren't going to give everything to you on a silver platter. You might have to work for it a little. You have to interpret it. Okay. Usually the protagonist is set with a bunch of obstacles. Most movies are about obstacles and how to get around them. Think about that. Next time you watch any of your movies, Spider Man, John Wick, he's trying to get around an obstacle. And till he gets around it, they're going to keep showing it. Then he might get around one obstacle, and guess what? Another one pops up. Cinematography. That is a fancy word for the person who's filming it on the actual camera. In the old days, it was called cinematography because the cinematographer was the guy operating the camera with his eye in the eyepiece looking at. That's not the director, folks. That's another person. The director essentially sets the shot up and tells the cinematographer he wants to see. Cinematographer makes it happen. He's also responsible for lighting. Cinematographer's lighting the place too. I don't want to go get too technical on the film making aspects of it, but it helps to know this stuff. Nowadays, because of unions and how we break everything down into all compartments, they're called directors of photography. Unless they operate their own camera, some do. Some filmmakers like Steven Soderbergh and they operate their own camera. They'd rather operate their own camera because they want to see exactly what's going on. What are the shots? Are they close-ups or medium shots? Is the camera moving? Is it just stationary? That's fine. Is it giving you what you think you need to visually stimulate your ideas of the story? Is it in the way of the story? Is the camera too busy? Is it getting in the way? Is it just sitting there looking at it with a dead eye? That's earlier films were mostly like that. What are they trying to do? They're trying to, in movies, it's about just a few things. What people, the characters do and say. Simple as that. Doesn't sound so simple, does it? What they do and what they say. Now, in a novel, you could go a lot different because a novel takes place up here in your imagination. And in a novel, you could say what they're feeling. In a film, you've got to show what they're feeling somehow through the visual medium. And that's a little trickier. It's not, it's actually easier to pull that off on a novel or a work of fiction. What's a point of view shot? POV, they call it. That is usually what the main character or a character sees. It's not the camera seeing the main character, John Wayne or John Wick sitting there, Keanu Reeves. It's what they see. It must be important for them to turn the camera around to just for the director wanting the audience to see what John Wick is seeing. Must be important. That's called a point of view shot. His point of view. It could be anybody's point of view, but usually whatever character is in the scene that's important. There is a balance in movie making within the frame of that camera, within my frame right here. I try to balance it out in my own little way. I've got my painting, my self portrait. Yes, that's me over there, folks. With my other paintings above my head, I'm framed by my paintings, and of course, my phone wire and Wi Fi to try to give you guys a little bit of a scene of what I'm doing and where I'm creating this incredible lecture. Then look at the acting, the performances, which is probably what you're focusing on. We all do. Are they convincing? Are they miscast? Is it not working for you because of some reason? Are they creating a coherent character? Are they? How? So don't just say in your essay, they're doing a great job. Charlie Chaplin's great in his acting. What makes it great? Break it down. You got to kind of look further. What makes it great? I'm convinced he's really this hobo living in this little room. Why? Because through his acting, his physicality, he seems to be occupying this character fully. He doesn't seem like a rich Hollywood movie star. Same with the child actor. He looks like he's a real kid from an orphanage. How is he pulling that off? Well, through empathy, through performance, everything. You could talk about any of these elements in your essay. You don't have to focus on all of them. These are just some of the things you can write about when you get stuck, what to write about. Editing. Nobody ever writes about editing. And it's one of the most key things in filmmaking. It's how they slice the scenes up together. I wish we were in the class together because I'd show you some scenes from the great Russian filmmaker Sergei Eisenstein. I might make you guys watch the documentary anyway, but don't worry yet. He essentially created montage filmmaking. What does that mean? It means a series of shots, series of images that might not even be connected to each other, but when you splice them together, it makes a coherent visual study in montage. Without montage, there'd be no cinema, folks. There's a part in part two on the documentary I want you to watch where they talk about montage and Sergei Eisenstein from Russia and how meaningful it was, what uh, his advancements in cinematography, and we're talking silent era, folks. His battleship Potemkin is a great example of that sort of storytelling with what they call parallel editing, meaning two things events are happening at once, going down a line, so we can go back and forth, and obviously the montage. Let's just look what else, and then I'll shut up. Look for some meaning in the film. When we get to Citizen Kane, and we're going to ask you what things mean. You could be wrong. It's okay. You've never seen it. I've seen it 50 times and I'm still wrong half the time. Or you can research about it. I hope you do some research on it so you might get some hints on what things are meaning. But there's things to look at. You go, well, what does that mean? What's really happening here? And that's how clever and advanced that film was, and how we're still studying, all 85 years later, we're still trying to figure out Citizen Kane. Anyway, I hope you guys are having fun with this. It's not too torturous for you. Um, okay. In the other book, The Story of Film, or you might have the new edition, which has a lighter cover. Why don't you guys go to, what do I got here? Why don't you guys go to page? Why can't I see my page number I wrote? Oh, yeah, 136. And essentially from 136 to 178, it covers this time that I've been talking about the last couple of days. Um, and what you're going to write about. The films that changed everything there was to change in the late 30s as we're coming out of the Depression. Read that section. It might help you write one of your papers, and then either this one or the next one. So that's where we are in the textbook. Read those 40 pages, and you'll be in good shape. If you don't have that, watch the documentary part two. I signed it this week. That covers this also, but the book is more in detail. And the book also will cover things that I can't cover because we don't have time, but it goes off into other countries, China and India, and we'll get in Japan. It's hard to cover it all. We're kind of doing a survey run up cinema studies on this. I'd love to sit there and go into detail on more of this stuff. I'll go into detail on the stuff we have time for. Okay. So what else? Oh yeah. So now we're gonna pop into World War II. Remember what I told you the other day in the lecture? 1941 hits. What happens in 1941? Remember, put what's happening in the culture and how it affects our movie going habits and the people who are making movies in Hollywood and elsewhere. But during the war, hardly anybody else was making movies because the world was at war, folks. London was getting bombed, France was getting bombed, Germany was getting bombed. Germany was still making films, by the way. They actually made their own films throughout the war, and they always depicted themselves as the heroes, by the way. Um, so they loved cinema. Hitler loved cinema. He loved Charlie Chaplin. Um, he was very, very enamored of American cinema. So anyway, World War II is on us now. And so what happens? How do we keep getting people to go to movies during a world war? We're have a war going on in Europe and in the Pacific on both sides, and we're stuck in the middle. We've got thousands of young men joining the army, being trained, going off to war, dying. Um, in the meantime, who's doing the jobs at home that they were doing? Women. Women step up in a big way. Women are our great asset when it comes to providing materials for the war machine. They're building the planes, the tanks, the guns, the bullets, because the men have gone into the army. And for the first time in the history of the world, women are doing the jobs that men used to do. Women were supposed to stay home and take care of the kids. Well, none of that now. You've heard of the persona of Rosie the Riveter. That's a strong woman who's taking care of business while their men are fighting the war. Everybody went to war in this country. Everybody was on board for the war. There was people who didn't believe in it, and there were objectors. That's there, but there wasn't a lot. But for the main thing, it was the good war. We're fighting Nazis, and we're fighting Japan, who was very brutal. They treated their neighbors like China very brutally. Two really motivated dictatorships against the democracy of the United States. Other countries joined us, but they didn't have our ways and means and the money. Well, England and other countries joined in the fight, Australia, but they were looking to us for financing to put their war machine together. And how did we do that so fast? And we had to do it fast, folks. Within months' notice, the war machine was up and running like never before because we had a peacetime country for 30 years. We didn't have, and so we didn't had a very small army. We didn't have much of an army at all until Pearl Harbor, and then we had to immediately overnight go into action. And boy, did we! And so Hollywood came calling with propaganda films depicting World War II. Even though it's the early stages, we don't even know who's going to win the war, but we knew we had to to pick the war as democracy fighting the bad guy. We were the protagonist, they were the antagonist. And so a lot of people were making movies in Hollywood. John Wayne would be one of them, starred in a bunch of them. Van Johnson, and a bunch of other Humphrey Bogart. Now, these guys didn't go into the actual army. Everybody was getting drafted. These guys had ways out of the draft. John Wayne had several kids, and so he chose not to go because he had a family to support. And so, but what John Wayne did was make a lot. He made many World War II movies about combat and heroic deeds. And his movies helped sell and make millions and millions of dollars in war bonds. A war bond was like we couldn't tax people enough to get the taxes to build all these battleships and army tanks, submarines. So they started selling war bonds to the private sector. For $5, $10, $20, you could buy a war bond. It was a certificate, and you hold on to it. It might be worth money someday. And so Hollywood started selling war bonds through movies. They would have a war movie, say starring, Sansa Iwo starring John Wayne, and and in the lobby of the movie theater, they would have an advertisement on screen saying, "Please buy war bonds when you're leaving the theater," and people bought. And when a movie star showed up at a premiere, whoever it was, it could have been Ronald Colman, Clark Gable, all of them, Carol Lombard. When they showed up to raise money, the coffers filled up fast. Everybody was in on trying to ramp up the war machine to fight these two antagonists on both the Pacific and Atlantic. So these films usually depicted them as the bad guy and US as the ultimately good guy. Well, in time of war, that line gets pretty blurred. Maybe someone's been in the military here, maybe served in Afghanistan. Those lines get pretty blurred pretty fast when your friends are getting killed right and left and how you respond to that. But we didn't show that, not in our propaganda films. And they are propaganda. It's not a bad word. It just means they're trying to shove the story in their way to make you feel good about yourself. That's where you're going to give money. Um, we didn't know till later that some of it was based on lies. And if you ever seen the movie Saving Private Ryan, there's scenes in it where Americans are executing German soldiers who have given up and put their hands up. That happened, folks. But in these movies, that didn't happen. We would never do that in a John Wayne movie. But let me tell you, folks, we did it. It's war. And war almost has no real, you either kill them or they kill you. Simple as that. And it gets pretty grim. They couldn't show that in these movies, especially the early World War movies, because we hadn't won the war yet. The war lasted 4 or 5 years, and we're just getting started. So that's what's happening in our movies in Hollywood. The war machine. Hollywood goes to war to raise money, and it was an important thing we needed to do. So we had to kind of skirt around the truth a bit, make everybody a good American, all American hero. But later on, that turned out to be a myth and a lie, and people don't accept it so much anymore. Here's a good example. During the first time when we went to war with the Middle East after 9/11, and we decided to go to war against Saddam Hussein. Uh, it was a purely volunteer army, and we had a lot of guys signing up for it. One of them was a football player. Oh, damn, I'm going to forget his name now. It's horrible. I'll come up with it in a second. He actually quit a professional football career. He was getting $2-3 million a year. He's just starting because he felt he wanted to go do something good for his country after we had been sneak attacked on the 9/11. And so he went, he wanted to serve his country. So he put his career aside, millions of dollars in career, and he went to fight the war. And during the war, he was killed. At first, the White House said he was killed by enemy fire. They made him a hero because who's ever conducting the war needs heroes to sell the war. So Bush, the junior, the second Bush, came out and said he was a hero. He died fighting for his country, and the coffers filled up. Taxpayers were really upset. They gave more money. Well, they found out later he was not killed by the enemy. He was killed by his own guys, accidentally. Friendly fire, they call it. He was shot from behind, meaning he was here where I am. He was being shot from people behind him, not in front of him. And they made this documentary. It's a gripping documentary on how he died. Well, his parents at the White House with Bush, accepting all the accolades and then they found out how their son really died, and the government had lied to them, and they were really upset. And they go, "We're not going to prop up the war machine on the death of our son. You lied to us. You lied to American people." And it was a big uh, lesson in how not to use propaganda. They got caught, folks. Um, he's still dead, by the way. So anyway, propaganda is really important to keep everybody happy. And so a lot of times the truth is submerged. That's where we are right now. I'll shut up. That's long enough. Look for the assignment tomorrow for the essay. Watch one of those movies. Write about one of them. Use what I'm saying in these lectures. I'm going to put this stuff on the assignment. Give you guys hints what to look at in your essay. Please get the book. It's going to really help. Unless you want me to read it out loud to you the whole time. Anyway, um, enjoy. This is movies. What's better than sit back and watching movies and writing about it? It's what I've been doing all my life. Still doing it. Now you're doing it. See you next time when the story of film continues.